right, so I would like to give it a little sponsor shout out. So this is for Burst IQ, is the company behind LifeGraph, a technology that revolutionizes how sensitive data is collected, managed, and controlled, powered by an innovative Web3 ready blockchain platform. LifeGraph equips your business with trusted, secure, and intelligent-driven data ecosystem. LifeGraph allows you to understand humans like never before. Use it to build solutions that meet the needs of your business better than you ever thought possible. All on a breakthrough platform that is amazingly easy to adopt. This panel is going to be a panel that focuses on consumer protection and privacy. They will cover topics including new privacy regulations and laws around the world, including Europe, Australia, and the United States. Obviously, they're going to be talking about MiCA. They will touch on reporting requirements and discuss the impact of privacy technologies, and our distinguished panelists will be introduced by Greg. Greg, if you'd come up and introduce your panelists.
Welcome, everybody. I hope you had a great break. So this is an interesting panel because it delves into issues of privacy as well as consumer protection. You know, if we're building these technologies for the people, we need to balance one against the other. We have some really distinguished people here to talk about this from all sides of the spectrum. I guess we could start from my left. So Frank Ricotta. I'm just going to say a couple words, and then I'd love for you guys to maybe say, some of you already have been up here, and so people know you. Nevertheless, Frank Ricotta is the CEO and founder of Burst IQ, the developer of LifeGraph, the solution that revolutionizes how sensitive data is collected, managed, and controlled. Frank has over 30 years of experience as a CEO and CTO, empowering people, building companies, and creating innovative solutions. We also have Michael Benzaken. He's a former chair and CEO of Life Sciences, multinational founder and executive director of the nonprofit Citizen Warrior Foundation. Woo! Michael is dedicated to creating more efficient economic development systems for foreign disaster relief and strengthening international diplomacy through cross-border commerce. His organization aims to unify people under the common cause, preserve the middle class, and reverse the cultural degradation, providing education and tools to individuals and distressed communities.
That was said fast. It's reverse cultural degradation using emergent tech.
And there's a lot of cultural degradation to go around to reverse. Dino, sorry if I mispronounce, Dino Cataldo Dell'Accio is the Chief Information Officer of the UN Joint Staff Pension Fund, an $80 billion fund that services thousands of retirees in 190 countries. He's also Digital Transformation Working Group Lead of the United Nations. Dino designed and built an identity management system for the UN to support and process the payments of the pension fund as well. And then, actually, there was a last-minute change on the panel. Amelia, yes. So you've already seen Amelia up here. Amelia Gardner, everybody. Government innovation leader and blockchain advocate. She's done some amazing things in Utah, many of which you've heard. And Utah is going to be one of the states we're going to talk about. The child protection law in Utah touches on privacy as well, because it requires people to perhaps upload their credentials to access websites and so on. So with that, I kind of want to give you an overview of what the scope is about, and then let's delve into it. So what we're really talking about, especially at the Government Blockchain Association, I'm just pulling up my notes here. What we're talking about is governments trying to balance things, as they always do, between one group's interests or another group's interests. Sometimes it's the same group. And so privacy is obviously an important right. Privacy was used, for example, in Roe versus Wade as to talk about how a woman's right to privacy can lead to birth control. Recently, that was overturned, I guess, Supreme Court. There's a lot of controversy with privacy. Also, we have people in government, obviously, some of whom want crimes to be solved. We had William Barr, for example, in Trump's administration, famously kind of against encryption. We have leaked documents recently from the Spanish government saying that they're against end-to-end encryption. There's a lot of that around the world, and so we want to talk about that. And yeah, maybe that's a good place to start. So end-to-end encryption is something that obviously preserves privacy. It's something that we are told by Facebook is in WhatsApp. We have to take their word for it. There's also in Telegram. You know, it's not on by default, but Pavel Durov has a history of trying to stand up for his users, I guess. He was booted out of Russia by the Russian government. In a way, made it difficult for him. Now he lives in Dubai. So all these messengers incorporate these privacy protections. Of course, there's Apple that FBI wanted them to unlock phones. They refused. There's all that stuff. On the one hand, there's people's privacy. On the other hand, ISIS was using Telegram to organize. And let's just say Durov's investors were not happy with that. How do you see it going forward? Do you see end-to-end encryption being under attack? Do you see it declining, or do you see it increasing in this space? I guess we can go in order. So, Frank.
So I get to be the first one? So, when you look at encryption, one, it's just an enforcement mechanism. It's on that spectrum of privacy-enhanced tech. And where does it fall? And again, we're balancing individual rights versus, the safety of a broader society. But I think we need to take a step back and kind of look at this and what we've given up over time as well. So, when you get online and you see HTTPS, okay, it's encrypted. But both sides are really looking at that data. Where we've compromised our own privacy for the sake of free services, and now we're trying to kind of claw that back. And a lot of the blockchain Web3 foundations, really pushing more ownership and privacy of individual data out to the user, where it's more of a consented mechanism. So do I see end-to-end encryption really continuing to explode? Yes, I do. But I also see techniques on a broader level to even penetrate that veil. When we talk about WhatsApp, I hate to tell you, Facebook can see your WhatsApp messages. That's why there's Signal and other things like that. And it's not going to go away, because there's a community that will want their privacy and will gravitate to those communities that support individual freedoms. At the same time, it's the same argument we have with Bitcoin. It's used for nefarious purposes, but yet they like the auditability of it in actuality. So yes, we're going to see a lot more of it, I think.
All right. Amelia, what do you see out of Utah?
So Utah we have a unique culture in Utah. A large part of that is my lineage and in my DNA. And I was just looking up how many of you have heard this quote by Benjamin Franklin: "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary security," as I'm reading, deserve neither liberty nor safety, right? So as you think about it, throughout history, I'm thinking way back. Was it safer for the Hebrews to stay in Egypt or to follow Moses, right? But it was safer for them to stay in Egypt as slaves, but they chose liberty and left and wandered the wilderness for 40 years. So then we're going to fast forward, and my ancestor, William Brewster, who was on the Mayflower. Can you all imagine getting on a rickety wooden boat with nothing but the stars to guide you to travel across the ocean so that you can practice religious liberty? Do you think that was safe? I don't think so. And then fast forward, several hundred years, and my family once again left the state of Missouri and walked on foot across the Rocky Mountains to settle the valley that I live in today 170 years ago. Do you think it was safe walking on foot across the Rocky Mountains in the middle of the winter? No, a lot of my ancestors died during that process, but they did it so that they could have liberty. And so in the state of Utah, we are very protective of our children, and I think you'll probably bring this up. I mean, I have 6 children myself. I am a mama bear. You wanna see me go from a nice lady in a dress with high heels into a mama bear real fast? Mess with one of my children, right? But with that said, we value liberty. And so as far as like the end-to-end encryption goes, does it mean that we sacrifice some security? Absolutely it does. But I think liberty is worth fighting for.
Michael?
Don't mess with Mama Bear. Don't do it. So, yeah, for sure. Okay, so the topic. What? Like that? Like this. Okay. All right. So yeah, the topic of the panel, we're looking at trade-offs, right? We're looking at trade-offs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I would. Okay. So I would don't like it. Okay. I would have to say that it's a false dichotomy. So what consumer protections? Go ahead. What consumer protections? Let's get started. Privacy versus consumer protections. What consumer protections? So there may be consumer protections on the law. Are they being enforced? And how's that playing out in reality? So let's just start right there. What consumer protections? Sure, I pay for them. I love half my earnings going to consumer protections. That's fantastic, you know, the regulatory oversight, that's fantastic. I'm pro regulatory, reasonable regulatory oversight. But show me the consumer protections that protected FTX, unsecured creditors, Celsius Network, unsecured creditors, where the state, the oversight apparatus, literally repeated what we now know to be, can't say criminally, but fraudulent marketing as to how they generated their yield, which was the deciding factor as to why I moved all my money there, which is now in the debtor's estate, as ruled by District 4 in New York, as no longer being owned by the people who put all their stuff there. So consumer protections. Yeah, I made the biggest investment decision of my life based on the regulatory apparatus who validated a fraudulent claim, and now in a state who does not recognize federal capital losses to offset both the principal and earnings generated in the app that I was essentially coaxed into, both because of monetary policy, I wanted to hedge against inflation with the stable coin, and, right, a little suspicion of TradFi, I would have to say. So I'm going to end on, I don't want to keep on going, but that's just the question that I'm going to inject. What consumer protection? It can be on the books. Show me where it's being enforced in a way that's mitigating meaningless suffering. Show it to me.
By the way, to add to what you're saying, I was recently informed that the IRS has laid a claim to about $40 or $50 billion of tax. Yeah, front of the line before the debtors. So the government's taking a piece of FTX, of that FTX bankruptcy.
Yes, as New York did with Celsius Network, they took all of our intel and then spun it up, and then went right up to the point of gross negligence, but pulled back, right, just a little bit to keep it civil. From the line. Okay.
So that's another thing. Yeah, I'm in touch with some large claimants in that suit, and they're not happy. You know, they're saying, "How can you pay taxes on stolen money?" Interesting question. Well, I don't want to get into that or say words. Okay, Dino, you have an international view on this. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me give a little bit of a different twist, and this comes directly from my personal experience in designing an application that was intended, if you will, for a particular type of demographics. So my clients, the client that UN Joint Staff Pension Fund, are indeed retirees. In most of the cases, we're talking about senior people that are not very familiar with digital, with computer, but who, however, can benefit tremendously from the technology itself. So, of course, when we start designing the solution that eventually we put in practice, we look at every tool at our disposal that could protect the client, the end user. So end-to-end encryption, zero knowledge proof, privacy enhancing technique, and so forth and so on. But what we really realize that ultimately we need to make sure that we protect the user from themselves. Because no matter what kind of technology or encryption mechanism we may adopt, if they don't use a certain type of dual care, all this technology, all this sophisticated mechanism will not provide the expected benefit. And on the other side, I really felt, again, being a former auditor, as I shared in previous comments, I felt that I and we as an organization, we had the duty to protect. So the challenge in front of us is how do we package a solution that makes use of the latest encryption mechanism, the latest technology mechanism, a blockchain that does not put PII, personal identifiable information, on the chain, but keeps it off the chain, but at the same time creates an independently auditable record, in order to make then all this process, all this sophistication transparent to the end user. And that was the challenge that ultimately we were able to address by developing an application that uses biometrics. Because ultimately we couldn't trust them to keep the password, the private key, secret. Because we do know things happen, and especially with people that do not have that level of expertise, of understanding, familiarity, it would eventually happen, and we couldn't take that risk. So in thinking about, okay, what kind of secure mechanism we can use, ultimately is themselves. Protect themselves from themselves and use themselves as the key to use the system. Hence, we use the biometric facial recognition profile to give them access to the system.
Fantastic. Yeah, for authenticate, what you're talking about is authenticating yourself with the device. And you know, when you authenticate, by the way, in China they experimented, piloted this thing, pay with your face, you know, and that is a little bit susceptible to replay attacks. You know, I record your face and then I pay as you. So if you authenticate yourself, you authenticate to your device, right? The device that's in your hand, and then you unlock it with your face or biometrics. The privacy issue is more about what are your conversations. So I want to add a little twist here, okay? Private conversations that we're having, we're talking about, you know, personal relationships, sexual relationships, different things. Those are typically considered okay, you have a right to privacy there. In the context of serving a company or working for a corporation, a lot of stuff is logged, including in the banking system. Employees are typically observed, their conversations are observed. Public servants, I would love for all of government, you know, to be transparent or logged. You know, so we have C-SPAN, that's excellent. I love C-SPAN. You know, I would love to extend that to other things as well. So transparency, look, if they want to know how we spend $600, I would like to know how they spend trillions of dollars and why.
Well, I think on that, being an elected official myself, I think it's good to differentiate between the work that I do publicly in my job and like the conversations I have with my child, right?
Exactly.
And so there are people that come and say, well, I want to have access to all of your text messages. And my reply is, I don't waive my Fourth Amendment right when I put my name on the ballot. Like, you don't need to know about the conversations that I'm having with my teenager or with my mother or with my husband, right? With that said, total transparency on how I choose to spend taxpayer dollars, 100%. We should have that. We should have that transparency.
What about also in corporations, inside, you know, entities where you're working in the role of an employee, right? Same question. Does anybody want to take that in terms of, yes, of course, public servants of a city, of a state. What about of a pizzeria? I don't know. Would anyone have opinions about that?
Well, okay, so a lot of this is, you know, talking about conversation, basically. Do I have a right to understand what your conversations are? Again, I'm going to go back and forth on this. You know, one aspect in an official capacity, absolutely, if I'm an employer, I want to understand, particularly if an employee is putting me at risk. Conversely, I would hope my employees have the ability to have free flow of conversations on lots of topics and explore different ideas and positions to come up with, a course of action or what we might be able to do without holding that against them. And, too often somebody says something and all of a sudden it's held against them when they're exploring an idea or a concept, and we've lost the ability to have civil conversations with different opinions without fear of ramifications. And this also extends, I think, to some of the bigger elements. Who owns you? I mean, that's really what it amounts to, particularly as we transition from this, full physical state to kind of a hybrid state of online physical presence to full virtual space. Who owns your personas online? Who owns your digital identity? Who owns that data and data track? We've relegated a lot of that to big tech at this point in time. We're trying to claw that back. The European Union just fined Facebook a huge amount, and is going to impact their operations. We work a lot with health data, so there's privacy regulations associated with health data, but most states don't say you own your own health data. You have access to it, but you don't own it. Why? And other jurisdictions say I can't store health data of a citizen outside a geographic boundary. So again, I think the fundamental issue is who owns you in a digital form, and including your identity, which then translates to these other conversations and topics. And I would hate for us to do something that limits our ability to explore and to push before we say, hey, this is what I think.
Well, an international spin on that, I spent 4 years in Canada, and you don't own your health data in Canada, and you don't actually have a right to view it without a court order unless you have a doctor that's willing to show it to you. Because the government controls and pays for the medical care, the government owns that information. So even though it's my medical information, they own it. And when I was moving back to the US, that was a challenge to get all of my health data to bring with me to the US to give to my doctor. Yeah.
Self-sovereignty, yeah. I think that's a huge part of what we're here to do, right, with blockchain. Own your own keys, not your data, I guess, not your, yeah.
I'm sorry, can I jump in?
Please jump in.
So, okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so the monetary value of data is the focus of the future. Access is the focus of the future. Focus is the focus of the future.
Closer.
Oh my goodness. Okay, can you hear me now?
Said like a lot.
Okay, all right, here's. All right, here we go. Okay, I have to collect my thoughts now. So, okay, let's say we talk about we want to have free healthcare or subsidized healthcare. Do you understand the value of your data, if properly tracked, to be able to determine probabilistic outcomes that would be able to innovate, determine what medication, so not misdiagnosed, direct diagnosis, decrease costs in healthcare? So it's funny because there's this, again, a false dichotomy. I keep on saying all these conversations are false. Like, I just want to get to the root cause of it, is that it's not, so yeah, we ought to own our data, but we consent into whatever we consent into. We need to understand the value of our data can fundamentally change the things that the so-called left and right, who ostensibly hate each other right now, fight over. Okay, there's so much, I'm gonna call it graft and inefficiency, and without the knowledge of the value of data and how it's being used, that can solve the problems that have plagued humanity since time immemorial. And I'm not being hyperbolic. That's it.
I want to ask each of you one question, sort of like a pointed question, based on your background. So, Dino, for example, you just to look at the international view, because you're at the UN. Let me just rattle off a couple things that's happened just in the last few years. Okay, so we have the European, in the EU, we've got the, well, yes, we have GDPR for consumer protection. That's important. It had a big effect. But we also have some new bills coming down the pike. There's things like, for example, in the United Kingdom, we have the online safety bill for children. Basically, you would have to reveal your age in order to surf the internet. because, well, how would you prove that you're over 18? There's ways, there's verifiable credentials, but the lawmakers have to learn about those. There's also the Cyber Resilience Act in the EU that for the first time might encumber open source developers to put stuff in their software or face prosecution, I suppose. How do you view this at the UN? Because obviously there's freedom of expression by open source developers and others that has historically been pretty protected. But these days, it seems sometimes we go after the makers of the tools, to force them to spy on their citizens, I guess, or users.
Good question. So, as has been said by people much more prepared than myself on international law, it goes by saying, without saying, that the UN is an international organization, and therefore we are not subject to any of this legislation or jurisdiction you just mentioned. However, we feel the duty to actually give the best examples in complying with this principle. And therefore, if you actually try to read our own internal regulation, which by the way are public, we try exactly to mirror, if you will, principles that are consistent and aligned with all this legislation that you just mentioned. So specifically speaking about data protection and privacy. In 2018, again, it's something that you can easily verify publicly. In October 2018, the High-Level Management Committee of the UN, which is a body that coordinates all the activities and the policy at a high level, all the UN entities, the 50 UN entities that Benedetta was alluding to before, issue exactly 10 principles for data protection and privacy. And if you read them, you will see that by and large are reflecting exactly the same principle that have been initiated in those legislation at the national level have been issued. I will go a little step further and again, try now to bring this to my specific personal experience. So when we build this digital identity solution for the retiree and beneficiary, think about this distinction. Here you have the UN building an application and a solution for individuals that are no longer part of the UN. Because now they retire, they reside in any 192 countries around the world, they are citizens, and therefore they are subject to legislation that applies only to their country. So the challenge here is, how can we design something that comply with the first and foremost with the UN regulation, but also that's sensitive to the potential other principle requirement of other countries, although we are not subject to it. So the solution, and it's really not an easy solution, it's not perfect solution, is to actually hold as less data as possible within the UN system.
I think that's an important point. Data used to be this thing that corporations wanted to hoard, right? It was big data. And by making it costly, sometimes toxic, to hold data you don't need, which GDPR pioneered, then you got California's law as well. Now they have to do the calculation, right? The bottom line depends on how much data you hold, why you hold it, do you really need that data? You have to get creative why you need that data. So here in the United States, I want to turn to the United States. Just to finish with international, Australian hacking bill, very interesting bill, allows authorities to even get access to your account to impersonate you in extreme cases. Maybe if you're a terrorist, they'll log on and say, I no longer believe in this thing. My followers dispersed. I don't know. But here in the United States, okay, we had things like FOSTA, which was for child protection. Some like the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, free speech advocates. The United States has a very strong protections for free speech. I interviewed Noam Chomsky, who is like the biggest critic of the United States many times, and I got him to admit, he admits this freely, that the United States has even though he criticizes the United States, he praises it for being the biggest, most free country in terms of free speech, he says, since the 60s, of any country. So if you think things are bad here, go see how things are elsewhere. But we had, in the name of the children, which I want to ask, you know, Sesta Fosta was about also shutting down some speech or sites. Craigslist, I think, was shut down voluntarily because of this. Also, Earn It Act, which was proposed. LAED was another act. Basically, there's an IRS reporting requirement for $600 that they proposed to pay for the infrastructure bill as well. They wanted the brokers to move your money, like Venmo, to report anything over $600. This is not to mention FATCA, which is the international guys, unelected perhaps bureaucrats, but they tell every country that $1,000 is the travel rule. It says if they have to report anything moving like that. So, so to Utah, yes, I was going to bring this up. In Utah, they have a media law for children that just passed, and basically the idea is, look, the children shouldn't be accessing certain sites, and it's certainly true that you know, TikTok and Instagram has had a deleterious effect on Reddit, sure, but teenage girls, they did studies like record levels of sadness, lots of, you know, the media machine applied to the teenage brain, okay? And you see these perfect airbrushed AI models or whatever, and you're thinking of yourself, who am I? So I understand why Utah wants to do it. How are they going to do it? How are they going to enforce any of this?
I think this is a great question to have, and this is a great room to have the conversation in, because we're innovators. So Utah wanted to lead the way in child protection. I think it's common sense, and it's openly accepted globally that children, particularly when your brain is in development, your frontal lobe is not fully developed. We've all agreed that there are certain addictive substances that we shouldn't give to children, particularly while their brain is developing, because then it patterns them for addiction. Things like tobacco and alcohol. I mean, how many of you think that that's very reasonable to restrict children from alcohol and tobacco, right? Okay, so then we further that and we say, we can actually show using science that these social media sites trigger the same chemical response in the brain as tobacco and alcohol and cocaine even, right? It triggers those same areas, and it causes an addictive reaction. We also know through a generation that it is doing irreparable harm. It's actually abusive. I mean, if there was a child who was in a horribly mentally abusive household, then the government would come in and take that child out of that abusive household. Well, on that same note, these social media sites, we now have a decade of data that shows that this is incredibly emotionally abusive and that it's affecting the brain development. So Utah, we're leading, and we've come forward and we've said there's two different bills. There's one for pornography sites. Pornhub has geocached Utah, and you currently cannot access Pornhub from the state of Utah because they've geocached that you have to verify your identity each time. And then we also have the social media law that's saying anyone under the age of 16 can't have a social media account. Between 16 and 18 has to be restricted between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. So how are we going to implement that? We don't actually know yet. We did a delayed implementation until January of 2024. Because we value privacy, we're looking for a way that we can do that. Can we get a third-party provider, or does the Department of Commerce in the state of Utah become that third-party provider that can come in and gather that? We already have that information. We already know, we already have your birth certificate. We're the one who made your birth certificate, right? So can we come in and can we just send a ping to these providers and say, we have verified that this person is who they say they are, and yes, they are over the age of 18. We haven't yet figured that out, but that's really what we need to talk about. Our Department of Commerce, the legislators who passed the law, those who sponsored the law, they're all willing to look at a way, how do we balance protection and privacy, and can we use the Department of Commerce as an intermediary to do that? But we need the underlying technology.
I really think this is good that the Government Blockchain Association exists, because the people that the legislators need to talk to are the people who know about zero-knowledge proofs, okay?
And we're open to that in Utah. I mean, we're one of those crazy states that's open to zero-knowledge proof. We want that, but we just need the technology.
Yes, because...
Very good. Very good.
Thank you. That conversation needs to happen, because over at the pond in Britain, they think that you need to present literally your passport to access every website, because they don't understand there's things like verifiable credentials, and there's things like zero knowledge proofs, where you could just say I'm over 18 without revealing who you are. So that's something I think needs to happen, and I'm glad you're here. Okay,
Wait,
so
maybe
Frank,
before we
Yeah.
jump on that real quick, right? It's about
1 minute.
verification.
Sorry.
It's about verification, right? So we used to have a thing called civic duty, and they used to be taught in schools, and that would create what we had called like societal cohesion, meaning that we honored our neighbors and we treated them well, and would give them a cup of sugar if they asked, as opposed to seeing them as the other and would want to fight a bloody civil war, let's say, right? Just pulling it out. So yes, there is a third option, again, which is the community policing of those who claim stewardship over this domain. And talking about blockchain and token curated economies, talking about building communities, Greg, right?
Sure.
On shared first principles that start at the local level, which is going to help solve a lot of
he's
economic
pointing at me
problems.
because I do that.
And which is going to start,
Yeah.
but then all the shared first principle communities can then link up through voluntary association.
Well,
So-
in the 30 seconds that we have left, I wanted to ask also Frank,
The third
what if somebody could watch the watchers? Like with healthcare, somebody uses your data, they have to log why they used it, how they used it, and little parts of it. What if we can apply that in all kinds of cases to solve rape on college campuses? I'm saying this is what if we had encrypted video everywhere, but we only decrypted it with reasons and subpoenas and stuff? What do you think?
Well, that's an awesome question, big picture. So I think, let's go back to the balance.
In 20 seconds, sorry.
So the answer, I think, is all things are doable via technology. I mean, it's evolving very rapidly, and we didn't even touch on all the generative AI and all the privacy aspects of all that stuff. It really goes back to community standards. What are our community standards? How do we enforce those community standards? Who do we protect in our society, and how do we protect them? How do we enforce the laws of the land? All that kind of stuff has to be foundational in the governance structure for the technology to work effectively, good or bad. There's a reason that a lot of sci-fi novels end up in dystopian versus utopian environments. And those are the things we have to guard against when it comes to privacy and data sharing.
I would,
All right, wait a sec. We've been trying to actually have greater amounts of engagement with the audience, and there was one question over here that we're going to give you time for.
Thank you. Hi, this is Jackie Cooper. Just so you know, I'm the GBA talk show host. You're all welcome to come on it. I do have a question. My background is also law, and I love the blockchain. But when we're talking about families and we're talking about privacy, sometimes we forget about the fact that we have adults and we have minors, but we also sometimes have accidents that happen. We have death that happens. So when that happens, we also have to think about how do we give access to family members so they can then access, like with pension and retirement, that aspect, or other things, because when we put in these privacy protections, sometimes our family members don't know how to access. So we need to think about some of the outliers so we can make sure that everyone is equal, in the consumer protection side and also the privacy side. So as everyone is developing this, just think about what are the consequences of the restrictions as well as the access points that we need for people that don't know yet. So anyway, thank you.
So let's tighten that question up.
So the question is, what might be going on that you know of in the community to provide access to, like in the UN, let's say that someone passes, but they still are allowed the retirement funds?
Very, very good question. Indeed, that was one of our challenging use cases. The way we addressed it is that we mirror what we do on the non-digital track. So we have cases of minor that are eligible to receive the benefit of their parents that passed away. So we have a procedure for legal guardian. So we designed the application to be issued using the biometric profile of the legal guardian and not the minor. That was the first step. The second step is, of course, we received almost immediately when we announced the intention to deploy the application from certain part of our client, our user base, the request to always keep an option for the manual process, not to necessarily replace and substitute, but just complement the process. And therefore, we are keeping a parallel process that is based on the manual process and not necessarily on the digital one.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. That was great.